सच्चिदानन्दरूपाय विश्वोत्पत्त्यादिहेतवे तापत्रयविनाशाय श्रीकृष्णाय वयं नुमः। वंशी विभूषितकरान् नवनीरदाभात् पीताम्बरादरुणविं बफलाधरोष्ठात् पूर्णेन्दुसुन्दरमुखाद् अरविन्दनेत्रात् कृष्णात् परं किमपि त्वमहं न जाने। निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
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 घनश्याम राधे राधे। घनश्याम राधे राधे।
श्याम राधे राधे। घनश्याम राधे राधे।
श्याम राधे राधे। घनश्याम राधे राधे।
श्याम राधे राधे। घनश्याम राधे राधे।
निकुंज में विराजे 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 घनश्याम राधे राधे।
श्याम राधे राधे। घनश्याम राधे राधे।
घनश्याम राधे राधे। घनश्याम राधे राधे।
श्याम राधे राधे। घनश्याम राधे राधे।
घनश्याम राधे राधे। घनश्याम राधे राधे।
निकुंज में विराजे 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 घनश्याम राधे राधे।
प्रेमी जन देख देख होते हैं प्रसन्न, जैसे प्रेमी परिपूर्ण जहाँ पृथ्वी में पवन में। करती प्रणाम मानो वसुधा को छूती हुई चित फंस जाता कुंजलती का सदन में। निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
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 श्याम राधे राधे। घनश्याम राधे राधे।
श्याम राधे राधे। घनश्याम राधे राधे।
श्याम राधे राधे। घनश्याम राधे राधे।
श्याम राधे राधे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
कुंज कली कृष्ण रूप धर धर पत्र रूप, बैठ सब ग्वाल बाल कालिंदी के तट में। बीच बीच गोपी और बीच बीच माधव का, देख लो विचित्र दृश्य चित्र मित्र पट पे। नित्य निशित में होती जहाँ नूपुर की, बारी डारों कोटि चंद्र चंद्रिका मुकुट पे। आज भी अखंड रास होता रास मंडल में, करता बिहार ब्रज राज बंसी वट में। निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
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 श्याम राधे राधे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
घनश्याम राधे राधे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
श्याम राधे राधे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
श्याम राधे राधे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
प्रेम विभोर उसे देख नहीं होता कौन, कौन नहीं जाता बिक जाके प्रेम हाट पे। बारी डारो हरे कृष्ण कल्पतरु कोटि कोटि, एक ही कदम्ब के विचित्र ठाट बाट पे। आता है चुराने श्याम चीर चीर घाट पे। निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे। निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे। निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे। कुंज 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 में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
कटी पग
कुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे। कुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
श्याम राधे राधे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
श्याम राधे राधे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
कुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे।
कलित कदम्बों के कमनीय केली कुंज में, कल कल करता कालिंद का किनारा हो। त्रिखे नैन दृगतान मुरली प्रबंध करे ललिता रंग देवी मंडल रचाया गया भानु सुता द्वार हो प्रेम अवतार कृष्ण करता बिहार जहाँ प्रेमियों को क्यों न फिर वृंदावन भाता है निकुंज में विराजे
घनश्याम राधे राधे निकुंज में विराजे घनश्याम राधे राधे
कुंज में विराजे
घनश्याम राधे राधे
वृंदावन बिहारी लाल की जय।
Welcome to Satsang. As these beautiful days get shorter and shorter in terms of the length of the sun, as they get chillier and chillier and night comes earlier and earlier. It's the time of year, that winter time, in which people tend to, anyway, go within. And now with these second or third waves of COVID happening all over the world, we're being told over and over again, go back in, go back in. Going in physically may seem like an inconvenience. It may seem like it's yet another hassle, difficulty, especially with the holiday season happening. But we realize that for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, spiritually, we've been saying, go back in, go back in. There's a reason that meditation centers, retreat centers, spiritual centers all over the world tend to be enclosed. They don't take place usually right in the middle of big cities where you're roaming around outside in the daytime and then just meditating in the evening, or doing your morning meditation and then going out for shopping. They tend to be very self-enclosed, very self-contained, because even though most people who go don't live there forever, whether they're there for a few days or a few weeks, during that time, that intensity of growth that comes from being just within is so powerful. And so as winter approaches, as that internal instinct of just going within, staying cozy, staying warm, sitting inside with a cup of tea or hot chocolate or whatever it may be, as that is coupled with the tragedy, the horrendous tragedy of knowing that going within is the only way to stay safe, to keep others safe. As we do that, we also realize that it's an opportunity to have some enforced meditative time, enforced introspective time, enforced spiritual time. So I notice as we have satsang outside in the garden, where it's just so sacredly beautiful each evening, as it gets chillier and chillier, that it's actually even more of a beautiful energy of the universe saying, go in, go in, go in. But go in here, go deeper here. So it's such a beautiful, beautiful opportunity to share these moments of satsang together. Yes.
When I was young, I sexually abused someone. Then a few years later, I was sexually abused. I always felt like God had punished me for what I did. Is this an example of karma? You reap and what you sow.
So, the law of karma, yes, it's a natural scientific law. That which we sow, we reap. The seeds we plant, those are the trees that are going to grow in our garden. Those are the fruits we're going to have to eat. It's the law of nature, the law of science, the law of karma. But it's not always quite so obvious in kind of a boomerang sort of way. I hit someone, they hit me back. I tell a lie to someone, they tell a lie to me. Or in a more deeply tragic way, as in the question. Someone sexually abuses someone else, then they get sexually abused themselves. Is it karma? Yes, of course it's karma. But a situation like that is one of those that's very, very simple. You could say, well, yes, okay, so I brought about this energy of abuse, this energy of exploitation, this energy of taking advantage of another, using my power over another, taking away someone else's power, taking away someone else's freedom, stomping on someone's rights, stomping on their humanity. Naturally that's going to happen to me. And in this case, it happened in a very, very specific mirror image type of way. The person who asked the question had sexually abused someone else, and a few years later, they were sexually abused themselves. A lot of times, though, karma isn't quite so cut and dry. So a more common example might be, staying with the beginning of the story, the questioner takes advantage of someone, sexually abuses someone, engages in behavior that is amoral, wrong, abusive, exploitive, violating of another, violating all of our values and ethics, the yamas, the niyamas. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to experience the exact same thing in the exact same way a few years later. The law of karma sometimes works in more subtle ways. I plant seeds of harm, seeds of abuse, seeds of violation. Well, that's going to grow in the garden of my life. And it may not necessarily manifest in coming back and hitting me in exactly the way that I hit someone else. But it's going to come back. It's absolutely going to come back. In the same way that if you plant an apple seed, you can be pretty sure that at some point in the future you're going to get an apple tree. But what's important when we think about karma is, on the one hand, it provides a very interesting and very helpful explanation. Why did this happen? Well, it happened because of something I did in the past. Here's what I have today. Why? Well, because of something from the past. Whether it was 5 minutes ago, I have a stomach ache now. Well, 5 minutes ago, if I ate 15 boxes of, milk duds, I'd have a stomach ache. But it could have also been something from years and years ago. Maybe the stomach ache is due to anxiety, and maybe the anxiety is a product of a life pattern that began with something that happened to me or something I did many years ago. So there's a lot of ways that karma works in our life. Sometimes immediately. Eat too many milk duds, end up with a stomach ache. Sometimes a little bit more subtle. You know, sometimes it's like a rushing river that sweeps you up and off your feet immediately. Sometimes it's more like a very slowly kind of meandering stream. You don't realize you're wet until much later, because it's slow and it's gentle. So karma serves, well, thinking about and understanding karma serves several purposes. One, it gives us explanations. It gives us a way of understanding, why am I in this boat today? What did I do, or what situation was there in my past, recent past, medium past, long time ago past, that could have led to this moment? And usually it's a mix of all of them, the immediate, the kind of medium long term ago, the long term ago. But it also helps us to understand how to move forward in the future. Because I know, for example, that what I have now is due to the past. How do I then change my future? So if you do something wrong, again, going back to the questioner, the person who asked this question had sexually abused someone else. So after they do that, after they engage in a behavior that they know is wrong, that they know is abusive and violating and harmful to another, well, one way is you just wait for karma to catch up with you, not knowing exactly when or where or how, but just kind of like in the movies, that music that plays, and you know, okay, something's going to come. You don't know exactly from where, you don't know exactly what it's going to be, but you know that music is playing, something's going to come. But another much more proactive way is to figure out what you can do to mitigate that. To know I've just set off a karmic reaction that is not going to be pleasant when it comes back and bites me in the rear end. What can I do? What can I do to mitigate that? We cannot, as the expression says, put an arrow back in the bow. The arrow that you've let go from the bow is gone. But what can I do to mitigate that? What good work can I do? What spiritual work can I do for true deep repentance and awareness, but also for true deep transformation? Because the law of karma is not about punishment. It's not, you've been bad, let me punish you. It's, you've been ignorant. In that ignorance, you have committed sin. That sin is going to come back. But the ultimate goal of the universe is not to punish people so they can get their due. The ultimate goal of the universe is that we should wake up. We should know the truth of who we are. And when you engage in behaviors that violate another, that harm another, that abuse another, when you engage in behaviors that are about power and lust and greed, you're living on the most superficial level of existence. You're living so identified with your story, with your body, with the chemical and electrical behaviors and patterns in the body. You're living as a puppet, really, where just chemistry and electricity and patterns are kind of pulling the strings, and you're this puppet. And so the very best way to mitigate that is to engage in such deep spiritual practice that there's never even the possibility that such an act could ever come from you again. There's never even the possibility that you could lose yourself in such a way again. Ultimately, that is the awareness that the universe wants you to have. To know so fully, so completely, the wholeness and the fullness and the perfection and the divinity of yourself. That the idea of harming yourself or yourself in another body is inconceivable. Through what you eat, through what you buy, through what you wear, through what you say, through how you live, through what you do. You become a very beautiful asset to creation. So don't wait around for karma to come back and bite you. When you know you've done something wrong, yes, make amends to whatever extent you can. Apologize to the person you've harmed as fully, as deeply, as sincerely as you can. But also recognize that your greatest responsibility now is to dispel whatever ignorance it was that led you to do that in the first place.
I love my parents, but I can't express my feelings to them because they had some expectations from me to which I tried my best to fulfill but cheated and failed. What should I do?
Well, I'm always in favor of expressing yourself. So in this case, as the questioner asks, I love my parents, but I can't express it to them because they had an agenda for me. They wanted some things from me, and I failed them. So what does that mean? What it means is I feel shameful. They wanted something from me. I couldn't do it. I failed. The questioner also said I cheated. So not only did I fail in what they wanted from me, but I also failed myself as a human being of integrity. I cheated and I failed. It's one thing to cheat and win. It's another thing to cheat and fail. In either case, the cheating stings you and harms you and brings the negative karmic fruit. But to cheat and fail is kind of this double whammy of shame. And what shame does is it becomes so pervasive. Shame doesn't just say, you were not good in math. Parents maybe, I don't know what the agenda was, the question didn't mention it, but let's say, for example, that the parents had an agenda, that you would be a scientist or a doctor or an engineer, something that required you to learn math. And let's just say you couldn't do it, and you cheated. You looked over at your friend's paper, you did something to cheat, but still you failed. Shame tells you that not only did you fail math, but you're a failure of a human being. And that's why you can't express yourself, because shame keeps us from even being able to look up and see people in the eye. It makes us feel that who we are as a being, every aspect of us, pervasively, is wrong, is bad. And shame also a lot of times has not only a sense of pervasiveness in space, like all of me is bad, but it also tends to have a pervasiveness in time. I always have been bad. I always will be bad. There is nothing redeemable about me as a being. And that's where it's so important, no matter how hard it is, to pull yourself out of that mental framework, out of the framework that says you don't deserve to hold your head up. You can't tell them that you love them because, look, you failed. Now, I don't know what type of parents you have, because parents are humans, and humans are all different. Ideally, in a perfect world, I would be able to tell you, don't worry, sweetheart. Your parents are going to say they love you anyway. Your parents are going to support you anyway. Yes, they had an agenda, you couldn't do it. Don't worry. Nonetheless, they're going to support you. But I don't know that. Because there's a lot of people in the world who are parents, but who are still so stuck in their own dramas, who are still so stuck in their own stories and their own challenges and their own fears and their own egos and their own anger and their own illusions and ignorance, that they cannot say that. There are parents who need you to behave a certain way, to look a certain way, to dress a certain way, to be a certain way, for them to feel okay. I wish that in the same way we had to take a test to drive a car, right? I mean, you have to take a test to drive a car because they understand that a car has the possibility of killing other people. If you drive it incorrectly, you kill people. You kill yourself, you kill others. So you have to take a test. You have to pass a test. You have to prove that you know how to drive a car. But sadly, there's no test you have to take to become a parent. If I were in charge of the universe, I would make there be a test that parents had to take. Some level of personal awareness. Some level of personal introspection that would enable them not to be perfect by any means, not to be enlightened or awakened. We wouldn't set the bar very high. But simply parents who had the ability to understand this child is not here to help my social standing in society. This child is not here to do the things that I wanted to do in life and I couldn't, so I'm going to make my child do them for me. My child is not here as an extension, a physical extension of me, to be exactly the way that I want them to be. They're not a dress-up doll. But there isn't that test. So I'm not able to sadly tell you exactly what your parents are going to say. But what I would say is, whatever they say, it doesn't matter. Because at some point in all of our lives, we reach a point where we realize our parents did the very best they could. They did the best that they could with the toolbox that they had. Some parents have very full toolboxes, full of patience and compassion, understanding, personal grounding, some spirituality. And then they have those tools to parent with. But some parents don't have those tools. Their toolbox is full only with fear and anger, impatience, frustration, ignorance. And so that's what they parent with. But even they are doing the best that they can with their toolboxes. And there comes a point in every one of our life, regardless of how full or how empty our parents' toolboxes were, at which point we need to run our lives. At which point we need to stop saying, I am this way because my mom, or I am this way because my dad, in which we are able to say, I know that I deserve my space on planet Earth. I know that I am full, I am whole, I am complete, I am perfect, I am divine, regardless of what they've told me. I know that I am here on earth for a beautiful divine purpose, regardless of how stupid and worthless they may have told me that I was. I know that. Because the truth, the capital T truth, comes from God, not the mouth of an exasperated, scared, confused parent. And so we forgive them. We forgive them. And we grow up. And we stop looking down and stop feeling like we can't hold our heads up and stop feeling full of shame. Just because they had an agenda for us, created out of whatever created their agenda. Maybe you weren't able to fulfill it. But are you able to fulfill God's agenda for you? God isn't worried about what your career is going to be or what score you're going to get on a math test. Are you able to be the fullest, the truest, the most awake, alive, grounded, anchored, courageous, connected you on earth? That's your only core job. Can you do that? Hold your head up. Tell them you love them. Even if what you get in response is you are worthless, you're a failure, you've embarrassed us, you've disappointed us. Your truth is that you love them. So tell them. Make sure to tell them. Speak your truth. And if they can't hear it, it's their loss. And if you can't say it to them physically, close your eyes. Sit in your mandir, close your eyes and just tell them there, I love you, Mom, I love you, Dad. I'm sorry you can't see me for the perfection that I am. But know that your calling on earth is to be the most sincere, most true, most anchored and grounded tool, instrument in the divine's hands that you can be. Sometimes it aligns with our parents' agenda. Sometimes it doesn't. But that's the nature of the universe. But your truth of love is something you should absolutely express. Let go of the shame. There is nothing to feel shameful about.
How do you deal with spiritual depression?
Spiritual depression. Now this is actually the first time I've heard this term. I don't even know what spiritual depression would be. But let's look at it, because unfortunately, one of the challenges of satsang in the time of COVID is, instead of questioners sitting together here with us, asking questions right here from their heart, where I can turn around and say, sweetheart, what do you mean? The questions come in advance. You're sending them to us online in comments on social media or by email. So let's look at it. Spiritual depression. So depression is referred to in the psychological world little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's referred to in the psychological world as the piece of poop, let's say. That's not what they say, but we'll sanitize the language. Piece of poop at the center of the universe. Now, there's two pieces to that. A piece of poop and the center of the universe. Meaning, I feel horrible about myself, and it's all about me. This is why connection is so critical to treating depression. This is why service and giving is such a beautiful antidote to depression. Because depression is that in which we feel separate. Sometimes we feel separate, surrounded by hundreds of people. It's not necessarily physical aloneness, but we feel alone. Alone at this center of the universe, where I'm separate from myself. I'm separate from those around me. I'm separate from the divine creation. I'm separate from God. And this is where reconnection is so important. On a core spiritual level, reconnecting with the divine. But also, reconnecting with those around you, deeply. And if we don't have that, if we're surrounded by people but not able to connect, can you connect with an animal? Can you connect with a tree? Can you be of service in some way? I know in these days of COVID, it's a double whammy. We're not even able to be with people. Being of service to people is a very, very powerful antidote, or service to animals, or service to nature. Planting trees, working in an animal shelter, being with children in an orphanage, in a poor school, on the cancer ward of a hospital. Being helpful. Reading to blind people or elderly. It's something that enables us to connect, and it's also something that enables us to recognize the value of us here on earth. Another aspect of depression has to do a lot with how separate we feel from people, or the world and ourselves, and how separate we feel from anything that matters. A purpose in life, a meaning in life, any reason to get out of bed. And again, this is where being of service plays such an important role. There is someone who benefits by my getting out of bed today. There is someone whose life I am improving by getting out of bed today. Now, on a spiritual level, depression is that dis-ease. Sometimes it's severe enough that it's actually a diagnosable disease. Sometimes it's more of just a momentary, few hours, few days kind of blip. Because not all moments of sadness are depression. Depression is something that tends to linger, tends to be more pervasive. But this sense of dis-ease, where nothing matters, nothing you do matters. You're not connected to anything that matters. Doesn't matter to anybody if you get out of bed today. So spiritually, we have to, whether we are preventing depression or treating depression, align ourselves in connection to others. And as I said, connection to God ideally, but it's very difficult to begin there if you don't already have a spiritual practice and you're in the midst of suffering from depression. It's easier to connect with a human who needs your help, a stray dog who needs your help, someone who needs your help. But ideally where we're going, ultimately, is to a connection with God, a connection to the perfection of the universe. This experience of divine consciousness, of which we are part. This experience of divine light, divine perfection, divine oneness, nothing but God. But along the way, use whatever you need to connect. If it's another human being, if it's an animal, if it's a tree, if it's a sunset. But in that being, or in that experience of nature, try to see not just a love of that being, but try to really feel how connected you are. Feel them in you and you in them on an energetic level. Experience that connection and find something meaningful you can be engaged in. Something that brings benefit to the world. Something that helps others. Align yourself with something that matters. And get help. Because I know the question asked about spiritual depression, but there are times where we need some assistance other than just our spiritual practice. There are times when our meditative practice may not be strong enough. When our spiritual grounding may not be strong enough. Our spiritual anchoring may not be strong enough. Where we need some extra assistance from the world of psychology, the world of therapy, the world of medicine. Reach out, get help. There is help. Because depression tends to also feel very pervasive, like shame. That it's going to last forever. The sun will not rise again. And that it's over every area of my life. There is nothing in which I can find joy. Nothing that matters. And it never will matter, and there never will be joy. And sometimes we need a hand to pull us, just to pull us out of there. Get help. Do not feel that it's a sign of weakness. Do not feel that there's something wrong with you. Do not feel ashamed. Get help. There are times in all of our lives that we need someone to help us get up. And sometimes that person is a therapist, is a doctor, is a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Do not feel badly to get that help. But along with that, get your spiritual practice so strong, your spiritual grounding so strong, that in the future, you're able to witness it. You're able to be present with waves of emotions and emotional states that ebb and flow in your life, and not to get carried out to sea by the waves of them. But for now, if you're suffering, and a lot of people are suffering these days, aside from the physical aspects, a lot of people are suffering. Emotionally, psychologically, get help. We're so happy that the satsang, the meditation, is something that you turn to that helps you. And you may find that you need some additional help. And that's okay. That's okay too. Keep coming to satsang, keep coming to meditation. And if you need some additional help, get it. You're worth it. And this too shall pass. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening. Beautiful day, today, tomorrow, depending on where you are in the world. And we'll see you back on Monday for meditation.